I think HR practitioners can go astray and find themselves doing the work without thinking about the context of the work.
Hello there. This is John Bernatovich, your host of the HR Like a Boss podcast. Thank you for listening. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share with a friend. I've embarked on a journey to get to know amazingly awesome HR and business professionals, and I'm trying to understand what it takes to do HR like a boss. On today's episode, I'm delighted to be joined by Andrew Bartlow. Andrew and I actually met just recently through professional networking and kind of like-minded business owners and HR consultants. So Andrew, welcome to the HR Like a Boss podcast.
Thanks a lot, John. Good to be with you.
So for those that don't know you, Andrew, why don't you share a little bit about your professional background and what you're working on these days?
Sure. 25 plus years of human resources experience at companies very large and very small and everything in between. Have been, I think I've worked for, call it a dozen companies over those 25 years, and have been in the top human resources job, call it 4 times over that period. A couple of years ago, had a great exit from a real estate tech company that I had a little tiny piece of when it got huge. And I pulled my golden parachute and I wrote my bucket list book, and I started consulting and advising private equity backed and venture backed companies and mentoring other HR leaders. So I do that in a couple of different ways, but that's what I've been up to lately, and you're really pleased to share whatever I can with your audience.
All right, we always ask our guests, the very first question on this podcast is to share, and you have a very unique perspective on this, so I'll be curious to see what your response is. The purpose of human resources, according to Andrew Bartlow. How would you describe that?
Oh my goodness, I don't know if I fully prepared for that one. That's like a meaning of life question. So the purpose of human resources, the purpose of the human resources function, I think is to help a organization meet its goals. That's the high level view. And to do that, there's lots of sub-bullets there. You need to understand what those goals are, understand who your stakeholders are. So it's the investors, it's the leadership team, it's the employees, it's the community, it's your customers, the broader world at large. But at the highest level, I think the purpose of human resources is to help an organization meet its goals.
You being in an entrepreneurial role, leadership in 4 different companies, as head of HR responsibility, how can you help leadership establish clarity on those most important aspects of your client's business? And I think you mentioned about goals in your purpose. So it's kind of how are you going to do that?
Yeah, well, it starts with deciding what those goals are, and the human resources function and HR leader. We are usually best positioned to help the business leaders do that. Where if the CEO or senior leadership team hasn't already clarified it, and at lots of high growth, high change organizations, it's so chaotic where they're trying to do everything all at once. It becomes a real challenge at small businesses of all types to really firm up around what are those key few priorities. So decide, an HR team can help facilitate through that. Write it down and communicate the heck out of it. So that's how you establish clarity. I really like Patrick Lencioni's work, author of 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, The Advantage, a bunch of stuff. He has 6 questions for clarity that I'll turn to with a number of my clients, and I find that to be immensely helpful in getting organizational alignment.
Moving on to what I thought was probably the most controversial topic when I started down this path of presenting on HR Like a Boss and writing the book and doing the podcast, was this idea of why, when I talk to people that aren't in HR, they get this proud look on their face, disgruntled feeling, and sometimes they'll say, I hate HR, right? Wow, those are strong words. So there's this stigma, I think, that exists, I believe, more so outside of the profession than in, I certainly hope, but of this, HR is the police, HR is the devil, HR is fill in the blank of a bad word that doesn't make you feel good. How do you think the human resource profession got to that point? And then how do they break that stigma of that perception?
Yeah, hey, I've had similar issues where for years, when people asked me what I did for a living, I wouldn't say HR. I was embarrassed to say it because I'd get those uncomfortable comments. I would say something to the effect of I do internal management consulting, which is accurate. Like that's the work, but it's telling where somebody that did it for as long as I continue to do wouldn't fess up to working in HR. I think HR practitioners can go astray and find themselves doing the work without thinking about the context of the work. So maybe that's overly focusing on one stakeholder or one aspect of the work, overly focusing on compliance or litigation risk mitigation, or keeping the leadership team happy, trying to push through programs, or the brightest, shiniest, most progressive HR practices that we read about on the weekend. So if you go too far in any one of those camps, if you're not thinking about the broader, why does HR exist and who are all your stakeholders and what's all the stuff that you're trying to accomplish, that's where people can rightly resent the work that we do. If we lose the context and don't balance it and position it properly.
I always get people out of here on this. The last question on the HR Like a Boss podcast is asking my guest, how do you describe someone that does HR like a boss?
But I think ownership is a big piece of it. I think designing the experience, designing the employee experience through management practices and processes. So those are big flowery words. I'll try to share a short analogy. HR like a boss isn't just delivering the burger at a restaurant, right, with a smile and making a friend along the way. That's valuable. That's something you want on your team. That's a customer service that you can be proud of. There's higher value operating like a boss, where you're designing the menu at that restaurant, where you're designing the employment experience, where you're helping the senior leadership team figure out how people move through that restaurant, what the roles should be, what the shift patterns are. So HR like a boss isn't just executing the work that somebody else puts in front of you, it's designing how your organization operates.
So Andrew, thank you for being on the show.
John, really appreciate it. Thank you.
You got it. Thank you for checking out the HR Like a Boss podcast. If it resonates with you, please consider leaving a rating and review. And better yet, subscribe and share with a friend. Until next time, let's continue to aspire to do amazingly awesome HR.